Hello everyone, I'm GaffedMaster974 here again today, and welcome to another Valve Hammer tutorial. This time around I'm going to finish off the custom Emancipation field ideas I had for Portal. This is going to include the Portal blocker and the full blocker Emancipation fields ideas. Now what I've gone ahead and done is created this tube-like passageway. I've got a player with a portal gun. I've got a prop physics that's simply called box, and that's the only thing that's been modified here. And I've also got a filter activator name, which is called filter underscore box set to filter box. And that's going to help with some of the things that I'm going to demonstrate here. So as is customary with these kind of tutorials that I do, first things first, we've got to set the bounds of the field. And I think every single time I've shown one of these, it's always been a 128 by 128 by essentially 1 thickness. But you can resize these however you see fit. So get the field, or the actual cleanser model. We've got to rotate this in the Z and move it into position over here somewhere. Change the grid size and put it into position, shift drag over to the other side, rotate it 180 degrees, and again put it into position. So this gives the bounds of the field as per usual. And for the portal blocker, which I'm going to demonstrate how to create first, you want to use the effects light rail beam 1 texture, which is what I already got selected here. And as I would usually say, select it to be around the middle of the fields, so it covers the area that you want it to, 128 by 128 in this case, and also 1 thickness. Hit enter to create the brush, and I think I'll leave it with default texture scalings. So in this case, just go Control T to type to a brush based entity, and have it as a func brush. You can call it something like Portal Blocker if you really want to. And I disable shadows, so select disable shadows to yes, and the solidity to never solid. And I think that's all I would have done there in that regard. So this basically defines the texture of the fields, and the functionality of the field is what's going to come into play now. So that's the way I would have done these fields. The texture is a func brush that is essentially not solid, and then player clipping, physics clipping, and that comes from other brushes. So I might use more brushes than necessary for this, but this basically gives the full functionality that I want it to, the way that I knew how to do it probably like 4 years ago when I came up with this idea and only just got around to doing. So next thing is to get the invisible texture. So the tools invisible texture here, and again you want to select it to be around the center of the field area and hit enter. And in this case we're going to Control T it, and so a func, well, not a func brush, but a brush entity, and then make it a func clip v physics. And of course we can select the filter to be filter blocks as well. And we're not going to be dealing with inputs or outputs here, but if you are, then you can deal with a name and a disabled yes or no. But in this case we're just going to leave that blank. But the filter box is important because essentially what's going to happen is only the box in this case is going to get clipped on this. Now if you want it to apply to everything, then you might want to just deselect that filter, so then every physics object gets stuck on this field, or deal with other filters as well, but then you know that's going to get to bad territory, I guess, so don't deal with that necessarily. But in this case, because we only have the box to deal with and no cameras or anything like that, then using the filter in this case is a good thing to do. And the last thing we need is a trigger texture, and the trigger is going to be the portal cleanser. So what we do is put this into position, and what I'm actually going to do is resize the grid to 1 and just move this so it's not interfering with any of the other brushes, and hit enter to create the trigger texture. Again, Control T, and this time we want a trigger portal cleanser. In this case, we want it to not only affect clients but physics objects. And then in the info, again, just select the name filter box here. So then this, even though this affects both the player and physics object, it's only going to affect the box in this case. And what you could do is make all of this stuff exist in one singular area. So then you have the brush, the trigger, and the clip essentially all existing in one place. But I find that's a bit difficult in terms of actually being able to select what thing you want to use. And in this scenario, it's going to block physics objects on one side but dissolve them on the other. So it's down to personal preference really, if you want the field to be set up like this, to be a portal cleanser which dissolves the box on both sides, or just clip the box on both sides. And I think what I wanted to do was make it so it was a physics block, not a portal cleanser. So the portal cleanser blocks the portal shots essentially. So I guess in this case what I'll do is select the V physics, and one thing we can do is if we go under the transform tool, we can scale this. I think in my case it's in the Y direction to something like 1.2, and what that does is it actually scales up the thickness of the brush here. And what we can go ahead and do is move the portal cleanser into the middle of the clip brush essentially. So on the fly, what I'm going to try and do is move this back in the middle of the trigger here, and I just moved it the wrong way. So let me try that again. Let's move it minus 1.8, I guess, and hopefully that is enough to stick it in the middle of the clip, which it looks like it does. So if we go into the fine scale here, then you can actually see that it's in the middle. So that's good, that's what we want, and then you can just like move that to be about the middle of the field. Again, this is a finer than 1 unit scale, so be prepared for it not to work exactly as you want it to. It's there or thereabouts, and I guess that's all that really matters. So that is the portal blocker at least. And to finish off with, we can always use the obligatory ambient generic, sticking that in the middle of the field and giving it the usual sound effects. So in this case, just Alt Enter. Because I gave the texture a name, well, we'll have it so this sound comes from that brush. We can give it certain bounds as per usual. And it is the shield touch loop sound effect, which is, of course, that sound effect. So just do that. Then we don't want it to play everywhere. We don't want it to start silent, and it is looped. So all those are unchecked. We're not doing anything with inputs and outputs. So that is the extent of what we have to do for the portal blocker. So what I'll do is I'll show gameplay at this point, but hopefully what you should see is that on both sides the box gets clipped by physics, and you're not able to shoot portals through, but you can walk through and your portals aren't going to get erased. So that would be the concept of this field. It kind of tricks the player into thinking that you aren't able to go through it without having your portals erased. But then you can, and by doing the little scaling trick that I showed you, you can make it preferentially a clip portal physics objects cleanser, or you have it a physics cleanser on one side and a clip on the other, however you want to work it. But in my case, I think I wanted it to be clipped on both sides, so then you don't end up with the box getting dissolved when you try and push the box into the field, so to speak. So that is how you go about creating the portal blocker. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is demonstrate how to create the full blocker. Now it's going to be very similar to the portal blocker, but what I'm going to do to be on the safe side is actually get rid of everything, leaving the field and of course the sound to remain. Of course I don't have to change the sound name origin, but in this case what I'm going to do is, as is customary, just create the texture field first given the bounds of the field. And in this case it's again 128, 128. It's exactly the same setup as I've just used as you saw, but in this case we're using the effects combine shields texture. So if I just get rid of the filter for a moment, then it's the effects combine shield shield water faded. That's the specific texture that I'm using. It is a Half-Life 2 texture, and it's going to be a funk brush. And yeah, I'm going to set the render effects, I think it is, no, render mode. I always get that mixed up, but the render mode is additive, and I believe I set the solidity to never solid because that's the way I do this. The effect, the actual texture that you see is just a texture. It's not meant to be anything more than that. So because we want this to be a full block, we're actually going to rely on the player clip texture here. So this is going to clip the player. So again, making it one thick, just create the player clip. And if you're going down the route of inputs and outputs, then you can tie this to a funk brush as well. This time you just leave solidity to toggle, and that's all you really need to do there. Just make sure you give it a name in that as well. So this ensures that the player gets stuck on this. Then relying on the invisible texture again, what we can do is just create another brush. Again, I'm going to go down to 1 thickness, and I'm just going to create this a little bit above this and just stretch it over so it fits the bounds. Hit enter, Control T this, and this is going to be the clip V physics, which is going to block the physics objects. And the last thing we need is the trigger texture, which is going to be the portal cleanser, and I'll do it at the bottom down here. And this serves to essentially stop portals from going through. So create a trigger portal cleanser down here, and clients and physics objects, and that should be everything, I guess. I guess we can leave this to be filter box as well, so it, you know, only selects the box. We don't want it to erase portals necessarily, we just want it to block portals. But again, it's just gonna dissolve the box on touch, I guess. But we don't really want to do that. So what we can go ahead and do is, by selecting the trigger texture, which is down here, we can set this to coincide with the effect brush, which is not that one, but this one. So what I'll do is I'll just move this back a couple. And so what we should have is that we have a player clip on one side and a physics clip on the other, and sandwiched in the middle is a portal cleanser and an effect. And again, we have the sound, which is going to come from the actual effect texture. So again, we can give this a name, call it blocker for instance, and then under the sound, instead of portal blocker, we just have blocker. And this is what I call the full blocker, because the player's not able to get through, physics objects aren't able to get through, and portals can't get through. So it serves as a full-on barricade in the form of an emancipation field, and you can turn it on and off to allow the player to get through a certain area on a timer, or by putting a box on a button, for instance. So that would be a case for this, and I can always demonstrate gameplay, though of course I would have to add some more stuff to the map, like a button to demonstrate how it actually works. But in essence, what you should notice is, you know, you can't shoot portals through it, you can't walk through it, and physics objects can't go through it, and I'll try and demonstrate that in the gameplay that I show. But that should hopefully wrap up the custom emancipation field ideas that I had. So this would actually cover all of the emancipation fields at this point. I did a tutorial way back about the fizz blocker, and only recently I covered the hard light bridge, the death field, which you could have got from Portal 2, Portal Still Alive, and now the last couple ideas, which was the portal blocker and the full blocker. So maybe you have other ideas of custom emancipation field ideas. You can make them on your own terms. You can modify what I've showed you to your own devices. There's many combinations I'm sure that you can have of different fields that you want, but this is all that I'm going to be demonstrating. The next Portal tutorial I guess I'll do would be the electric death field from Portal Still Alive. That's going to be a complicated tutorial to do because there's a lot of stuff going on, and I have to actually look into everything that's going on and probably put it in a text document on my second monitor and basically do that as I go along, because it is a lengthy and complex thing to do. But with that, I'm going to end this video off here. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you found some enjoyment or entertainment out of this. Peace out, take care, see you later.